Fourth time's the charm. I don't know if this is going to work, folks. I might have to change locations, which would really suck, because that would mean I have to sit outside. And it's like walking through a bowl of soup out there. But we'll see. Alright. Let's try this again. It says I'm online, so I'm going to trust it. Alright. So, where was I at on this? Yeah, so election. Alright. So, I think we're going to have an issue with the fact that Trump is going to claim that he has won, and the media is not going to be able to push back on that. They're going to be able to sit, they're going to be like, well, he says he won, and Biden says they won, and the Supreme Court's deliberating on it, and so we're all just going to kind of hold on and wait, and then we're all going to turn around middle of January. He has the sack to be like, hey, whoa, hold on, you didn't win, hold on. And with a Republican Supreme Court, and a probably, well, the Dems might flip the Senate, they're probably going to flip the Senate, but with a Republican Supreme Court, and with a president who has zero shame for just saying nonsense, and who cares what else, right? Just who's going to stop me? You and what army is essentially his opinion on this. He will just wander off into the sunset as the new president of the United States, and we will live in a country that has elected a president without winning the popular vote twice. Because, and this goes back decades to the transformation of our media into an apparatus that just stenographizes the news. They just copy down what they hear and put it out there. There is no feedback. There is no pushback against politicians. And that is why the Joe Biden strategy, the strategy of I'm a good person and he's a bad person, will not work. We've done it already. We tried that already, and it doesn't work. People don't care how virtuous you are. People don't care how much you like God. People don't care how much you love your grandchildren, or how much loss you've gone through in your life, or how nice you are to people, or how you're from a blue-collar background. Nobody gives a shit. That has been very clear. That has been made very, very clear by the Trump era. That has been made very clear. What people care about: can you benefit me materially? Can you provide me with material benefits that improve my life? And if you can't, will you make me feel like you're doing that? And here's the difference. Because Trump doesn't really provide any material benefits to anybody, and he's not running on any material benefits. But he makes people feel that way because he does things like put tariffs on China and talk about how China's ripping us off. And really the problem that you're having as a middle-class worker in America is that all these corporations have sold you out to the Chinese. And so that's the problem. Your wages are low, and you can't find a good job, and you can't put food on the table all the time because China has stolen all our good jobs and given them to people in more desperate situations to make less money. Right? Whether that's true or not, he's making people feel like that's a material benefit when he slaps a temporary tariff on there. He's making people feel like that is consequential to their everyday experience, without having to engage in protectionism or any of the things that the Republican Party wouldn't like. And so the whole theory of we're going to run this campaign based on the idea of Trump bad, Joe Biden good, is insane. It is insane. But the decision that has been made by the people that work for Joe Biden and Joe Biden himself is that they are going to tack to the right. They are going to, because the crucial demographic that has to be won in this election is the suburban woman. That is what they have decided. Both parties have decided that that is where the votes are going to come from. And guess what? We know how they vote already. They broke for Trump overwhelmingly before. And they will again. And sitting here, putting our fate in the hands of a bunch of upper middle class to rich white women, for the most part, is going to end in a disaster. These people don't want to win, guys. They do not want to win. Because if they win, they are responsible for changing people's lives materially, and they can't have donor money in one hand, corporate donor money in one hand, and change people's lives materially in the other hand. Those two things cannot happen. And because they are a corporate-funded party, they cannot accomplish both things. And so they don't want to win. They don't want to win. Wrap your head around this. And that makes it make more sense why the keynote speaker on the first night of the DNC damn near was John fucking Kasich, a Republican governor, an ex-Republican presidential candidate that is only remembered because he was one of the last on the list when it looked like it was going to be Trump, and everybody was going, oh, please God, I hope they make the same decision and pick the white toast Republican guy, which of course they weren't going to. And if you have a problem with that, then ask yourself, how would liberals respond if Oprah Winfrey ran for president? Or The Rock? They would vote for them. Because it's all just identity bullshit. It's all just identity bullshit because we are having conversations. We are not having conversations along the lines of class. At all. We're having conversations along the lines of identity. And that's why Joe Biden backed himself, painted himself into a corner by saying, I'm going to pick a black woman to be my VP. And then we ended up with a shit sandwich. We ended up with a shit sandwich. In the middle of the biggest call for defunding the police, Joe Biden selected a prosecutor, a state prosecutor, as his VP, the top cop in California, who, if you will remember correctly, failed to prosecute Steve Mnuchin. Her department in California investigated Steve Mnuchin for financial crimes, and her department returned to her and said, we found 1,000 instances of criminality in this bank. And if we kept looking, we would probably find 1,000 more. And she declined to prosecute that person. And you know where that person works now? The United States Treasury. And you know what that person is in charge of now? Your stimulus check. That man is directly in charge of whether or not you get a stimulus check. And Kamala Harris failed to prosecute that guy. Not to mention, Kamala Harris went on live television at the debates and all but called Joe Biden a racist because of his involvement in the crime bill. And because of his involvement in hundreds of pieces of legislation that have hurt poor and working people in this country for decades. His entire existence, up until Barack Obama decided that he was the guy. Which, the only reason that Barack Obama made that decision was because Joe Biden was just racist enough to go out and be the guy, because Joe Biden, but the people who they wanted to capture, that, 30 to 40 to 50-year-old segment in 2008 that they wanted to capture when Obama was running, were people that were alive when Joe Biden was aligning himself with segregationists in the 70s. And So there was a certain segment of people, and there's documentation to this effect, that Joe Biden was able to speak to and say, don't worry, Barack Obama's not a crazy black guy, he's one of the good ones. He's one of the clean ones, or whatever the hell they needed to hear. And because Joe Biden was willing to vouch for Barack Obama, he got the VP slot. And now, he's the heir apparent. And that is the legacy that Barack Obama has. Barack Obama has the legacy of absolutely running as a populist, left, actual Bernie Sanders type candidate, and then governing like Ronald Reagan. And if you don't believe me, ask Dr. Cornel West, because he thinks the same shit. So this idea that Joe Biden is some sort of savior descending on a cloud to save us all from the unique evil that Republicans in this country represent is absurd. Joe Biden has spent his life working with those people to do the things that he now says he does not like. So yes, is my advice that we vote for Joe Biden? Of course. Because this is a country with two choices. That's the system that we live in. Those are the options that you have. So yes, you should vote for Joe Biden. But in the long term, do I believe that that is going to be good for the country and for society as a whole? Of course not. Because what is Joe Biden bringing in? What is he bringing? Kamala, Pete Buttigieg, these people who are so disconnected from the young people in this country and what young people want this country to look like that it's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. So, yes, I think we will end up all sitting around the week of November 4th with no election results, in chaos, because we will still be in the middle of a global pandemic. Whoever's running around telling you that there will be a vaccine before the election or before the end of the year is stupid, and that's not going to happen. And so we will be in the middle of a global pandemic with record mail-in voting, with record absentee ballots, where Trump has set the predicate that the election is fraudulent, that the Democrats are rigging it through mail-in voting and ballot harvesting and all that bullshit. And we will end up in a situation where the media has ceded all of their power to push back on politicians, and we will spend weeks in a constitutional crisis because we won't know who the president is. And then January 25th or January 15th or something like that, they inaugurate him. On Inauguration Day, they will inaugurate Trump because no one will be willing to violate the norms. And you know how I know this? Watch the actions of the most powerful Democrat in the government right now, Nancy Pelosi. She's the most powerful Democrat in the government, and she still will be on Election Day. She has done nothing but just go, would you look at what Trump's doing? Isn't that messed up? Isn't that messed up what he's doing over there? Somebody really ought to do something about that. You know, that's really... I mean, he's gassing peaceful protesters. He's denying that COVID is real. Damn, somebody who is in a position of power should really do something about this. When she's the Speaker of the fucking House. She's the most powerful Democrat in the country. Her and Chuck Schumer, anyway, are the most powerful Democrats in the country. And they do nothing but tweet and go on TV and go, would you look at this? Kevin Hart style. Would you look at this? Would somebody come over here and look at this? When they're the ones that can open investigations, they're the ones that can go on TV every day and use the media to condemn these people But unfortunately, they've spent so much time being feckless and useless morons that the words that come out of their mouth mean nothing. And if you think for 1 second that they are going to be able in any circumstance to stand up to Trump, who is willing to do things like, oh, Hillary, you're going to call me a sex abuser? That's fine. I'll put all of Bill Clinton's victims right here in the front row at the debate. If you think that those norm-observing, like, oh, you know, we got to be civil and we got to be democratic, if you think that those idiots are going to be the ones that are going to go, no, sir, you didn't win, fuck off, then you need to get off the internet. You need to go outside, get some sunlight, and think about shit a little bit harder. You need to look at the world through a lens wider than a toilet paper roll, because it's not going to happen. They have been empowered. They have been told. They have been in power the entire time that Trump has been there, and they have voted for his military budgets. They have done absolutely nothing while he has turned federal law enforcement agents on American citizens, whether you agree with their protests or not. And so we are living in a system where there are two parties that represent the same interest. And if I've said this once, I will have said it a million times. When the American people are given a choice between a Republican and a Republican, they will choose the actual Republican. Every time. Every time. The only way that Democrats win elections, look historically. You don't have to believe me. Look historically. Is if they run on bold ideas, actual policy, material benefits for people, and class struggle. It is the only elections that they have won for 100 years. And this is where we get into a little bit of history, I think. I think that it is important to provide historical context to the political problems that we are having right now. The Democratic Party lost its way after Jimmy Carter. Now, you could argue that that happened beforehand because they were a nightmare before that, but Jimmy Carter was really the last nail in the coffin for Democrats in the 21st century. Jimmy Carter shot himself in the foot by going on national television and making a national address from the Oval Office telling people that they were grubby cretins, basically, and that they needed to stop spending so much money. And he, through a whole lot of, coalescing events, ended up losing to Nixon. And immediately, Nixon got the win of freeing the hostages, and he was already a Trump-like celebrity. He was a household name. There are records, old vinyl records, of Ronald Reagan. Oh, did I say Nixon? I meant Reagan. Of Ronald Reagan doing voiceovers of why socialized medicine is bad. Because he was hired by the Nixon campaign to do that because he was huge. He was an enormous movie star and an American treasure. And the biggest spokesperson, he was basically the DJ Khaled of his generation in being a spokesperson for everything. And so the reality was, he had been already in the tank for a decade by the time he became president and implemented Reaganomics. And because of his popularity, he was able to push through a lot of stuff that constructed the New Deal and sent us into this era that we now live in of predatory capitalism, without any sort of protections for workers and without any sort of guardrails for the shit outcomes that come from just handing over the reins of your economy to a bunch of insane people. So Reagan, he's done, right? And here comes Bush Sr., okay? Bush Sr., who is the former head of the CIA, who, until the day that he left this earth, essentially, continued to receive his daily CIA security briefings so that he could know what was going on in the world. This cretin was the only Republican that I know of in our modern era to raise taxes on people. And guess what people said to that? Screw you. I don't care what your reasoning is. Pound sand, get the hell out of here. And in ushered the era of the most devastating family in the history of American politics, the Clintons. And here's our historical context, okay? The Clinton family, way back, Hillary, when she was in college, was the president of the Young Republicans at her college. Bill Clinton, when he was in government, was absolutely known for being a complete horn dog and what's the word for, like, you cheat on your wife all the time? Just the worst. Completely infidelity all over the place, doing whatever he wanted. He was a complete playboy, and he was also a triangulator. The Clintons had a firm belief that the only way for you to get anything done on a federal level was that you needed to scrape off 10 or 12 or 15 Republicans in the House and 10 or 12 or 15 Republicans in the Senate in order to get a majority so that you could pass shit. And to a normal person in the 90s, a fairly politically uninvolved generation, because you got to imagine Generation X didn't have to deal with any of the, didn't really have to deal with any of the upheaval of Vietnam. They didn't have to deal with they weren't part of the hippie movement. They didn't have to deal with the Cold War. They were mostly politically uninvolved in an era of Carter, Reagan, Bush Sr., and leading into Clinton. So this generation heard what Bill Clinton was saying, which was, look, folks, we've got to get a certain number of Republicans to agree with us, because if we don't, we can't get anything done. And so what we're going to do is triangulate. And they moved to the right. They started being for things like they started being against things like gay marriage. They started being actively for things like pro-life movements. They started wishy-washying on civil rights, voting rights. Bill Clinton passed the Telecommunications Act, which allowed our media to consolidate, where every television channel that you watch is owned by one of 6 companies. 6. It may even be 5 now that I think about it. And so we ended up in a situation where we had nobody to inform us what the hell was going on. And we had the Democratic Party getting into bed with the Republican Party in order to get things done. And those things that they got done were the crime bill, NAFTA, the Telecommunications Act, gutting welfare. Those were the quintessential achievements of the Bill Clinton era. And not only were they the quintessential achievements, Bill and Hillary went up to the mountaintop and shouted about it all the time. We got NAFTA done. We got this horrible HMO insurance plan done. You know, Hillary's big accomplishment that she always touts is that she was the first lady that was for healthcare. That she was the first lady that was going to provide us with a decent healthcare system, and that was her big like project as first lady, because every first lady feels like they need to have a project, right? And her project was healthcare. The plan that she came up with was dog shit. It was complete dog shit. It was HMOs and private insurers and deductibles, and maybe we cover a few extra people here, and maybe we drop a few extra people there, and she has taken the last 25 years to rewrite history and say that she was going for universal health care, but it just wasn't feasible. Well, yeah, it wasn't feasible because the people that you were working with were Republicans and in the pocket of corporations in this country. And so the Clintons were the first ones to go, well, instead of moving to the left and trying to mobilize people who are alienated and disenfranchised, we will instead move to the right and work with people who are doing the alienation and disenfranchisement. And with that came a lot of cheddar, baby. With that came a lot of money. With that came a lot of corporations willing to fork out the dough and willing to pay her for speeches and pay him for speeches and give campaign contributions and make sure that they were going to be reelected. And the Clintons, more than any other family in American politics, including the Obamas, were all about maintaining their status at the center of power. More than anything else. They were all about staying in a position of power. And it's not, in their framework, it was not because they're bad people or they're particularly evil or anything like that. It is simply because they view themselves, and you can watch any sort of media with Bill and Hillary in it, and it will make it very clear to you. They view themselves as the sole arbiters and the sole understanders of what is good for society. They've done the work, and they've read the policies, and they've really rolled up their sleeves and figured out what would be best for the American people, and therefore it is better for everybody if they are at the center of American power and they have their hand on all the levers, because only they are virtuous and righteous enough to make things right for people. It's the same problem that Elizabeth Warren has, which is, well, my heart's in the right place, and because my heart's in the right place, I'll do everything that's necessary to get to a powerful position. But by the time you've made all the compromises to get into power, you're no longer righteous, and you're no longer virtuous, and you no longer have the interests of the American people at heart. You can't have both things. It's the problem that AOC is developing, which is AOC wants to be speaker, which is admirable. She wants to be in a position of power so that she can affect real change. But the compromises that you have to make to get into a position of power in the overarching system eventually dissolves your ability to help real people. It puts you in a position to not be able to do the things that you want to do because of the deals that you've made and the compromises that you've been willing to make. It's the problem that AOC is running into, and it is the problem that Bernie ran into after 2016 when he decided to, instead of going outside of the Democratic Party to affect change, to try and affect change from within. And because the Democratic Party, we've talked about this before, because the Democratic Party exists in a world where capitalism is an absolute, and it cannot be, the economic framework of this country cannot be tangled with. It has to stay the same. They can only move the levers of power in a micro way. There is no way to give everybody health care. There is no way to have public housing for all. There is no way to movements of the lever because and so they can only move the levers a little bit. And when you have an actual... So, moving on in the history, right? Because this is going to lead us right up to Trump and then our current election. I'm getting there. After Clinton, we got Bush. Now, you can make the argument that the people of America did not elect that guy. Because they didn't. But, we got Bush. And Bush, people forget, was way, way, way materially worse. Sorry if you're wearing headphones. than Trump. Way worse. Not close in this world. That will never see their father, their children, their mother again. Because giants. There are hundreds of thousands of Americans that will never see their children again because they were sent to a useless war by an idiot. And I say that sitting here in Texas. So, these people that are rehabilitating Bush because he's become Bob Ross all of a sudden is bullshit and is a travesty and frankly is insulting to the memory of people who A, died on 9/11, which he ignored intelligence about and allowed to happen, and B, died overseas in a useless exploratory war that was only ever done for natural resources. And because we wanted to go around the world and be like, look at our huge big tank dick. That was it. That was the entire purpose of that movement. And so, George W. Bush, we have 8 years of Bush, which leads us into a endless war that we will, probably never escape from permanently. And starts the motor, well, doesn't really start the motor, but definitely puts an infinite amount of fuel into the motor of imperialist America.